Okay, so this is part 3 of our Anki tutorial in where we try to replicate the program Anki using Python and the module PyQt. So, in the last 2 episodes, we created a basic GUI which has the top labels of Anki. It's similar in size, but obviously it's far away from the finished product. So, if we take a comparison quickly, we can see that we need to do a few things. Firstly, we need to change the font of these top buttons. Then, we also need to give them a function and give a hover effect to them, as you can see over here. We also need to add these 2 lines. While they may seem small, they're still something. So, that's probably what we're going to do in this episode. So, without any waiting, I think we'll just get straight into it. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the font of the top buttons. So, to do that, we're going to actually need to use the Qt5 Python module. I'll explain how it's going to work. What you want to do is, right after you set essential widget, create a new variable called self.topFont. Now, self.topFont is going to be equal to qtgui.qfont. Now, if you can remember from the first episode, Qt is a submodule from PyQt, and it's basically controls, as in the name, all the GUI elements. So currently we're going to be using it for the font, but obviously you can use it for much more stuff. So now self.topFont.set bold true. Then self.topFont.set weight, we'll set it to 30. Then self.topFont.set point size to 9. Okay, so let me explain this now. Self.topFont.set bold true. That basically sets the font to bold. Pretty obvious. Next line, self.topFont.set weight 30. So we've set it to bold, but we haven't said how bold we want it. Do we want it really bold or just faintly bold? That's what this set weight is for. It basically chooses how thick and how bold the text is going to be. So currently 30 is actually quite low, and I'll show you what I mean. And then finally, self.topFont.set point size 9. Now, set point size basically just sets the actual size of the text. Set point size 1 would be very small text, and set point size 20 would be pretty big. Now, the last thing we want to do is we want to actually call the font. So to do that, we'll just use deck for now. We'll do self.deckLabel.setFont to self.topFont. So this is basically what our font looks like. as you can see, it's pretty hard to tell any difference. But if you look carefully, you can see that it's a little bit bold and it's bigger than the others. So now what we can do is we can actually change this set weight thing. Because you see, set weight 30, as I said, it's very not bold. Is that a word? I'm not sure. It's very thin. Not much difference. However, if we set it something like 75, this is actually much more bold. And you can actually tell the difference. There. Now you can see that it's actually bold, and a user would tell, okay, that's bold text. So you can play around with all of this stuff if you want. I'm sure there's much more stuff, set underline, set italic, all of that. But for now, this is all we'll do. Now, let's set this font for the rest of our labels. Oops. And now, if we check, we can see that they're all bold now. Okay, that's good. That's what I wanted. Now let's move on to step 2, where we give all of these a hover effect. So, over here, as we can see, when you hover, it underlines the label. Now, underlining is actually very difficult because you need to create multiple functions, one function for when the mouse enters, one function for when the mouse leaves, all of that. It gets confusing. So don't worry, we will do that just in time. For now, we'll simply set the text to a different color. So it's not very hard to do. It only takes one simple line, whereas setting an underline will take like 20 lines. Self.deck label dot set style sheet. So the style sheet is similar to CSS. It's like QSS. And over here you can add code, and this code will basically allow you to change more GUI elements of the widget. So we'll set the style sheet to q label colon hover curly brackets color colon would be equal to the RGB value of, well, currently it's black, and so black is equal to RGB 000. White is RGB 255 255 255. So let's go for the middle of roughly 100 100 100. And let's see how that looks. So we have these, and when we hover over deck, the color changes. Obviously it's not, entirely accurate, but it works. And I mean, it looks alright, which is what we want. Now obviously you can play around with this. You can change it to gradients, you can change the colors to rainbow, anything. But once again, I think I'll just stick with this. So now, once again, we'll copy it and we'll add it to each label. Right, there we go. And once again, let's just give it a quick test just to make sure everything's working correctly. Okay, deck hover, add hover, browse hover, stats hover, sync hover. Okay, okay, I can work with that. Now, step 2, so we've done step 1, we've changed the font. We've done step 2, we've added a hover. Now, step 3, we want to add a click. You know, something, we want something to happen when these are clicked. Obviously, currently add creates new window, browse, creates new window, stats, once again, new window. Everything does something. And we'll add that. Once you've done that, that's basically all we'll really do for these top labels. Obviously, we'll change the functions and everything, but we won't really touch those labels any further. So, let's start doing that right now. It's actually very simple. We'll use this click function, which means that we'll need to get rid of this because self.btn doesn't exist anymore. That was a test button for the first episode. Now, what we want to do is we're going to add something very simple. Self.deckLabel dot mouse press event will be equal to self.clicked. So whenever the mouse is pressed on deck label, it will run self.clicked. But there's an error now. When we try this, it's actually not going to work, and I'll show you why. The problem's in the clicked function. So a spelling mistake too. That's embarrassing. Okay, now there's actually an error still in this. So hovering works, but when we click decks, it freezes and stops. And we can see over here it says type error, clicked takes one positional argument but two are given. Now that doesn't make sense because what's this second variable we need to give to clicked? We don't need anything else. Well, we actually do. It's called the event argument, or I just call it EVE. Now, when you actually click the deck label, it sends two parameters to self.clicked. The first one, it sends one parameter. It sends two parameters. The first one's obviously self, and the second one is actually mouse press event to tell self.click, what's going on. Now we don't want that, but PyQt just does it, and I can actually show it to you. If you try print ev So let's run this. Now we have the hovers, we have the font, and when we click text, as you can see, it prints clicked, no error, and it prints this PyQt5.qt.GUI.QMouse event object at and a bunch of hex code. Now, this is just a problem PyQt has, but it's no big deal. We can just delete the print.ev and we have the working function. Now, let's once again add this to every other label. And obviously we need to change the variable names again. I keep on messing up at that last one. So now the buttons should be working. When we click text, okay, good, it prints clicked, and it does that for all of them, which is exactly what we wanted. Perfect. Now, obviously, they're not all gonna do the same thing, and later on we're going to change the function. Perhaps, self.clicked will be self.open deck, self.open add, open browse, Point is, later on it will all change. Now, that's all we really need for the top button labels, whatever you want to call them. They're actually basically the same as Anki. Now, obviously, underline's going to come, and this shortcut key thing that comes up, which I have to explain later on. But we can use that in time. Now, the next step is the final step. We want to add these two lines over here. Obviously, it's something small, but it's for aesthetics, and we are trying to make a replica of Anki. We want this to be as exact as we can. So, there are many ways to do this, and the way I'm going to use is I'm going to use a keyframe. So, self.line is equal to qt widgets dot keyframe self.line dot set geometry qtcore dot correct 0 0 1002 self.line dot, and again we're going to set the style sheet border 1 pixel solid black, why not? So this is a line, and I'm going to explain what it does. So firstly, you set self.line to a keyframe. A keyframe is literally just a frame. Then you set the geometry. Now if you remember from the first one where we created a basic screen, self.geometry is in charge of, size, positioning, all of that. So we set the geometry to starting at point 0 and starting at point 0, starting at point 0 horizontally, starting at point 0 vertically, ending at point 1000 horizontally, and ending at point 2 vertically. Then we set the style sheet and we set the border to 1 pixel solid black. Solid black's just a color. So I'll run it and we'll talk about some of the problems we have and some of the ways we can fix it. So here we are. Now, as you can see, this line forms. But we have a problem. It doesn't go all the way across the screen. Now, perhaps you're saying, okay, well, why don't we just put it into a layout? It's a Q-frame, so it's a bit difficult to put into a layout. But there are alternatives. So, what we're going to need is we're going to need the screen width. Now, I know my screen width. My screen width is 2560. Now, when I run this, my line is actually going to go from one side to the other. As you can see, it works now, but it would be a bit tedious if the user would have to find out their screen size and enter it when they install the program. So what you want to do is you want to actually create something called self.screenObject. Now this will be equal to qt widgets dot q desktop widget dot screen geometry 0. So what this does is this creates basically a size array. It creates an object that literally fills the whole screen. So using QWidgets, it creates a QDesktop widgets that size is, that screen geometry is equal to 0. 0 is your main screen. Now obviously this has problems too. For example, if they had a monitor, then it would have to be screen geometry 2. So there are problems, and obviously we will still fix those. But for now, this will suffice. Now, to actually use this, all we're going to do is we're going to set the width, the ending on the x-axis, to screen object dot width, and sorry, it must be self.screenObject. Now, when I run this, we can see that the line stretches all the way, and it should for every single screen now. The final thing we'll do is we'll actually change the color. So I'm going to do this really quickly. I'll open Anki. I'll get a guess of what this size is. So I think it's roughly 165. So to change it to an RGB value, we'll do RGB brackets just like in the other style sheet, and we'll change it to 165, 165, 1. No, I think it's 170. 170, 170. So now when we run this, we can see that, oh, it's a pretty nice color now too. Not, some solid black. So that's all working. Now the last thing to do is copy this line and create a second one. I'll just call this self.line2. Very creative. Now in this, we don't need to touch anything apart from this. We're going to change this to 60. And when we run this, we can see that look, we have a second line now that's underneath and evenly spaced. We can try and check it with Anki. So our one's actually a bit longer than Anki's, and if you were really nitty and nitpicky, you could try and fix that. I think it's a difference of probably 2 pixels. So if you changed it to 60 minus 2, which is 58, then we can try matching it up again, and there, an exact fit. So that's probably a wrap for this. I know that perhaps I talked about the lines a little bit rushed, and if you have a problem or you don't understand it, then you can always just Google it or just leave me a comment and I'll try my best to answer it. In the next one, we're going to be doing something that I want to do for ages. We're going to be firstly centering this. So when you create it, instead of it appearing at a random point like over here, it will appear in the middle, if that makes sense. And we will, I know I said I'll try this in the last one, but definitely in the next one, we will start making an add window. That was weird. But yeah, I think we'll try that next time. So I really hope you enjoyed this. If you want to know when the next one's coming out, then just subscribe, and I think I'll post part 4 next week.